First, can you tell us your name and what your involvement has been with the hospital over the years?
My name is Barbara Watson. I've been involved with the hospital, oh my gosh, how many years has it been? I was chairman of the governing board for 17 years, and I always laughed and said they just couldn't get rid of me, you know. I enjoyed every minute of it. The evolution of the hospital is just daunting. We went from a tiny hospital when I came on the governing board. And my first job on the governing board was with quality assurance. And it was simple. Quality assurance was retroactive. So they'd look at the files and the notes and decide if they were doing a good job or not. Then quality assurance advanced. It now is on the spot. They know if it's quality or not within 24 hours, which I think is remarkable. When I was chairman of the governing board, we decided we didn't want to be a rubber stamp. I was accused that community boards were just rubber stamps, and I was determined we weren't going to be that. And so we set up a new thing. Dr. Booth and I put our heads together and said it. Instead of hospital reporting to a committee of the governing of the board, we would have a person sit in on that committee. It wasn't heard of. Intermountain Healthcare said, "What are you doing?" We said, "Well, we didn't want to be a rubber stamp. We wanted to be more involved," which we were. Of course, that continued for about 10 years, and then it reverted back. So, and also with my tenure, the Cancer Center came to be, and I think that was one of the crowning glories of the time I was on the governing board. It was a dream, and I know we sat down with Senator Orrin Hatch and talked this over because we felt that people of this area had been impacted by radiation. And he was most communicative. And of course, in my mind, I thought, oh, sure. What will come of this interview? Politics is being what it is. Well, we sat down with him, and he returned to Washington and sent us a $1,000 check of his own money. He said, "I am committed." Then he went out and got us $3 million to start. We already, Intermountain Healthcare had already made some advances there. We had radiation oncologist here. And so with that $3 million, we were able to really launch, and we became the smallest fully accredited cancer center in the United States at that time. So it was really a wonderful achievement.
That's great. And you've been doing great. I forgot to mention, don't say IHC, and you haven't been, so thank you. I think I heard that you were instrumental in helping to expand that 400 East campus. You mentioned the Cancer Center. Did you help with the patient tower?
Yes, the patient tower. That was, it was called Certificate of Need at that time. You had to go before our government agency if you wanted to add on to your hospital. That was the government way of holding costs down. So you weren't building willy-nilly. And so I argued for the 5th floor of that tower, and they had never given one before. And I promised them that we would be in that 5th floor in a year. Well, I drive past, and there was that 5th floor vacant. Another year, it was still vacant. What had happened? Inpatient had changed. As outpatient grew, we didn't need that for 4 years. So, but we had it, and it was wonderful.
So you can shift this mic a little bit.
Maybe I'm getting softer.
So it was just getting too far behind your head, rather.
Oh.
There.
Great. So did you help with the initial construction of that building?
Yes. I got the permission to build it from the Certificate of Need Committee of the U.S. government. I argued for it. And so that was wonderful, because then when we needed it, we didn't have to shut down the floor below. So it was wonderful.
Okay. Were you involved in other expansions over there on the 400 East campus? Other additions?
Yes, the south entry. And there's so many things that went on at that time. Let me think of anything else that would be interesting.
Hold on just 1 second.
Earthquake or something.
Sounds like it. Oh, we formed the Dixie Regional Center Foundation. That came under my purview, too. And so the foundation is an arm of the governing board. And it has functioned beautifully, the foundation has, in raising money for the hospital. In fact, I entered a tree in the Jubilee of Trees. And we won 2 awards with the tree I put in this past week. We won the People's Choice Award and the City Council Award. Fabulous tree, if I may say so myself. It was wonderful. And we sold it for $6,000. So
Which tree was it?
it was history in the making with all the little buildings on it.
I like that one.
That was my tree. It was a great tree. It took us a year and a month to put it together. It was so complicated, all those little buildings.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Can you talk about your involvement in helping to build this new campus and why it was necessary and what went into that?
Oh, yes. As we have grown, we knew we needed the new campus, and so we were at a meeting and said, Intermountain Healthcare asked us how much could we raise in capital. And somebody said, well, $2 million would be quite nice. And Bob Cochran spoke up, and he said, we will raise $10 million. And we did. So I met with various people in the community, and we did raise our $10 million. They were wonderful to give up their money, their stock, or whatever. So that was my part in meeting with members of the community and got them to give. We were very soft approach, you know. But people of this community are fabulous, and they are behind this hospital. I hear so many compliments about this hospital. It comes right and left. Just had a little daughter-in-law, and she said, it really is good, isn't it? It is wonderful. The nurses are good. The care is good. And this is what we hear in this hospital.
That's great. So, going back, you were involved in Dixie Drug, right?
Yes, that was my...
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I was raised in Salt Lake City, and I met a young man at the University of Utah named Leon Watson. And they had just won the national basketball championship. And he was on the starting five, Leon Watson. And he wanted me to go out with him. And I ended up marrying him, and he moved me to St. George. Well, St. George at that time was a little dry desert town. And I cried all the way from Salt Lake to St. George. But I was here about 4 months, and I loved this place. And the red sand, and I got red sand in my shoes. And I remember at the hospital, when they divested, they had a little fundraiser. And so I took 1/4 of the city of St. George and canvassed it. And that's what brought me to the attention of the then governing board. And they asked me to be on the governing board. And a year later, Rolf Kerr, who was the chairman, was leaving, and they asked me to take it. And I took it for 17 years. They just couldn't get rid of me. But the Dixie Drug was an integral part of my family. And St. George has been a wonderful place to live, to bring up children. The medical care here is awesome.
Great. Can you remember any great stories about what the advancement in healthcare has meant over the years in this community?
Oh, heavens, yes.
Would you like to drink the water?
Yes, I would love a drink of water. I'm spitting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, Ian, that door's open too.
It won't shut for some reason. It's and I don't know.
Weird.
Let's see, what was the last question?
Do you have any great stories about what the advancement in healthcare
Oh,
has
yes.
meant to people who live?
First was quality assurance. That was the next step. Of course, the big one now is
Hold on
neurology.
1 second. I'm going to have you take your hands down just a little. Okay, yeah, you're just covering your face just a little bit there.
And now it's neurology at Dixie Regional Medical Center. And phase 2 in our emergency room. So we will be a level 2 now. So we don't have to fly all these people out to Las Vegas, Salt Lake, Provo. It's wonderful. We've kind of reached our goal almost. I repeat that. That was awful.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Too. I'm going to just focus a little. You keep leaning forward just a little, which is just fine, but I need to.
He gets it just right if you move it all.
I know. I'm 84 years old and I wiggle a bit.
You're allowed.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, start over.
Where were we?
So you were talking about what healthcare has meant to this community and how it's advanced.
I remember meeting a woman, Mrs. Bradshaw, at the airport many years ago, and she was standing there with her daughter, her granddaughter, and all their luggage. She had been diagnosed with cancer. And she came up and threw her arms around me, and I thought, oh, people will not have to do this anymore. Fly to Salt Lake to have radiation and chemotherapy. And it took me back. And I thought, I am doing something worthwhile. People do not have to fly out of St. George for care. And it really struck me at that time what I was doing was worthwhile, being involved with the hospital here. And I've loved it ever since.
That's great.
Can you talk about, I mean, today we're lucky enough to have this wonderful Life Flight helicopter. Back, you know, in the initial days of your involvement with medicine here, how would they handle those type of injuries?
People who had to get flown out, what happened?
Well, first it was fixed wing. And that was traumatic to fly people to Wasatch Front. It was for the family. They had to travel in their car up to join their loved ones. And when they no longer needed the fixed wing, except in rare occasions, head trauma, spine trauma. And then now we have our first neurosurgeon here, and he has just completed, I think, 11 surgeries. As of last night, it was 11 surgeries. So we are on our way. The next big, they're going to move the women's and children's over to this campus. And I was asked, which should come first, the Women's and Children's Pavilion or neurosurgery building? Of course, neurosurgery was my take on it. And I have a daughter that's an OBGYN doctor, you know. And I said, you know, I voted for neurosurgery, Tracy. And she said, I'm happy where I am at the old campus. So it was, so we're involved in the advancement of the hospital in increments, and they're slow. I remember when we first got our CAT scan, I was told a few years before that, I said, why can't we have a CAT scan here at the hospital? And they said, oh, we're too small. We won't have a CAT scan. 3 years later, we had a CAT scan. Advancement was that great and rapid.
Talk about the wonderful things they can do over at the NICU with children and the transition.
Oh, yes.
That's another.
Oh, yes. We raised money for the NICU, and this is a happy place. That's where my daughter delivers babies over there. We didn't have to fly these young babies out either. The Eggerts, Dr. and Dr. Eggert, they are wonderful physicians, and we respect them greatly here. And it made it possible for these little preemies to stay in St. George. And it was a happy, happy incident that we could do that.
Great. Can you think of any other advancements at the hospital that you've been a part of that really made a difference?
Oh, those are probably the biggest ones. Cancer Center. All of these things leading to us to be self-sufficient here. And of course, we're still operating 2 campuses and hope to have all of it on this campus. Now, I don't know, there's so many wonderful things. The creation of the foundation is a big thing. Oh my goodness. The list goes on and on and on. I wished I had made a list before I came. It would have been easier.
Well, you're doing great. You mentioned the Jubilee of Trees.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been involved in the Jubilee of Trees over the years?
Oh, of course, the governing board created the foundation and the Jubilee of Trees at the same time. I was instrumental in that, the creation of the Jubilee of Trees. And I probably submitted all 15 trees to the Jubilee of Trees. And my little granddaughter is now making wreaths for the Jubilee of Trees. She's just 16. Her wreath sold the first day. It was so beautiful. She's very artistic, a little 16-year-old. And I think it grows within families. Philanthropy grows and grows and grows. So here is my little great-granddaughter doing, in my footsteps maybe, and her mother's.
That's great.
Can you think of any funny or really interesting stories that have happened here?
Oh, goodness. One of the things we did when, get my hands away from my face. Can I have a drink of water?
Sure, absolutely. Please do. What kind of construction they have going on next? Turned off the bulldozer for.
Let's see. One of the things we did early on, which was unusual for hospital governing boards to do, the hospital boards reported to the governing board, whether it was called quality assurance or what other committee. And someone said the governing board is just a rubber stamp of the medical staff. And I determined, no, it really isn't, and we can become. So with Dr. Booth, we devised a way, instead of the hospital reporting to the governing board, we sent a person to the hospital committee. It hadn't been done in IHC, and it lasted for about 10 years. It was wonderful. Our members were immersed in the hospital, in their committees, not just a report to the governing board. And I think the people on the governing board loved it. They really did. They bought into it, and very, very loyal members of the governing board. Of course, physicians were on the governing board also. But that was a new wrinkle that I decided we should try.
So, with governing board members in committees and they're immersed in the hospital, was there any funny stories or funny things that happened?
I can think of some of the more serious things when I had to sit down on a disciplinary committee as chairman and tell a wonderful physician that we could no longer use his services. That was horrendous. A talented physician that brought many patients into the hospital. We had to tell him that we could no longer use him. That preyed on my mind for a long, long time. It was a horrible decision, but it had to be made.
So, would you say that you set a pretty high standard of conduct and what kind of people we wanted here? Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. I think the screening process has been wonderful. We have refused certain physicians. We used to call the hospital and say, because they had to be honest with you under the law, what was the problem with this physician in your hospital? And they'd have to answer us. And we refused, when I was on the governing board, I had half a dozen physicians because of their deportment, not because of their skill. Their skill was wonderful, but they were not friendly. They had habits that we didn't like. We were very, very fussy in the beginning, and it paid off.
Can you explain how it paid off? Or why you
It
did
paid off because we got the best of physicians here that didn't have personal problems or psychological problems or whatever. We screened them very tightly. And we have a medical staff here that is absolutely fantastic. And I think it's because of this beginning that we chose them very, very carefully who could practice in our hospital without restraint of trade. See, the governing board could do things that the medical staff couldn't do. They would be accused of restraint of trade. But as a governing board, we could do it.
Great. Can you think of anything else about what the hospital means to the community? You know, maybe about the quality of the staff here, the breadth of services that we have. Anything else you wanted to say about that?
I think I've pretty well covered it. I really do. Fabulous hospital. The treatment is great. Our doctors are fantastic. The nurses are so caring. The administration is enlightened. The foundation works so hard to raise money for the hospital. And people have bought into that.
Great. Anything else? Think we're good?
No, I'm sorry.